Hello, and welcome to Mending Chasms, Building Bridges in Community. My name is Leena Sharma Seth, and I am your host. I'm looking forward to today's conversation with my guest, and first we open with an acknowledgement. Canada exists as we know it today because of colonization. While we work to disrupt colonial and oppression-rooted practice in the work we feel called to do at Mending the Chasm, we also acknowledge our presence as uninvited guests on Brant Tract Treaty territory known as the traditional territories of the Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabeg, the Huron-Wendat, the Attawandaron or Neutral, and many other Indigenous communities who have stewarded this land since time immemorial. We also acknowledge the harm of colonization that resilient people of the global diaspora have experienced, including displacement, land theft, enslavement, violence, genocide, and cultural appropriation. Our aim is to work in solidarity with fellow community members to heal from the harm of colonization and to reclaim the joy, the inclusion, well-being, and liberation that is every human's birthright. So my guest today is Dr. Ailya Patel, ND. She's a naturopathic doctor, international board certified lactation consultant, a medical doctor trained in India, and I'm going to say a really powerful leader in the community. She speaks her mind. She cares about the community, and I'm really excited to be in conversation with her. She combines her extensive medical background with a deep understanding of holistic practices, emphasizing a culturally sensitive approach to health and wellness. Welcome, Ailya.
Thank you, Leena. So honored to be here today.
Amazing. So I gave my audience a little bit of a taste of who you are, but I wonder, in your own words, tell us about yourself.
Yeah. Um, I call it a nice mixture. I was born in Toronto. I grew up in the US. Um, for a while, we were there, and then my father was transferred to Libya. So we got to experience living in Libya, an amazing experience. Um, Unfortunately, he passed away there, and we had to come back then to Canada instead of the US. My mother chose Toronto to come home to. I went to school here, and one fine day, I had this bright idea that I was going to India for schooling. So, against my mom's wishes, she said, "Please just try here. Just no, it's far away." And but I was like, no, because living in Libya, we went to India every year. So I got to really kind of experience the Indian culture firsthand rather than, just being brought up in it. I got to really live it. So I was like, no, it's great, Mom. I'll be fine. Of course, I had it was an eye opener for me. Uh, there's other than, I guess, the cultural difference, although I was brought up, in an Indian household, living in India has had its own ups and downs, really kind of learning the ropes, and going to school there was a very a very different experience. When you do talk about racism and sometimes discrimination, you think, well, that's my land. I look like them. I am like them. But it's not always the case. Me just being born in another country and studying in India, I was still the outsider. So my whole time there, unfortunately, I was treated as an outsider the whole time. It was really difficult for me, but I did it. But I do take it as a wonderful experience that I was able to really um, be in the culture, like literally bare roots culture, being in the villages, working with the villagers, working with so many different socioeconomic groups. It was very eye opening, and I'm glad that I was able to take that with me, and that is part of um, me today and how I, deal with my patients. So yeah, that's a little bit about me in a nutshell.
Yeah, I appreciate you so much talking about it's a nuance that I don't think a lot of people understand that, and it resonates for me personally because I remember like, at one point in my younger days, I saved up to go and travel India and I thought like, okay, because growing up in Canada in a brown body, my belonging is constantly questioned. It's like, oh, where are you from? How long have you been here? And so part of the story I was telling myself was like, I'm going to the motherland, I'll belong there. And then exactly like you just shared, it was a similar experience where even though I could speak the language, I could read and write, I would dress, in clothing that was from the culture, and people would still recognize that you're not from there. And like, so I appreciate that so much. And so I'm glad that you've animated that reality for our viewers here. And I know you now as a naturopathic doctor,
Mhm,
so I'm
mhm.
curious about what drew you into the field of naturopathy, and what's that journey been like for you, and I even would say from an identity perspective, a lived experience perspective.
Yeah, so that as well, I go back to India for that piece as well. So in India, while I did practice, I practiced medicine. All of my professors, even the patients, they all went to herbal or natural practitioners first. It was the norm. It was a given. We did not expect anything else from them. And again, this is those from the lower socioeconomic groups and those from the villages as well. They would not come to a doctor first. It's number one, accessibility. Number two, there's that taboo around, conventional medicine. So it really kind of opened my eyes while I was there. I'm like, what is this different type of medicine that they go to? The herbs, Ayurveda, homeopathy. It's, I mean, my professors are fine with it. So what is it? So it always kind of piqued my interest. And if you go back a generation further or two generations further, my grandmother studied Unani medicine in India. So it is a combination of Indo Persian, Greek medicine that was taught in India. It still is in some places, and it was recognized by the medical board as regular physicians and surgeons. So she was basically an obstetrician, but through Unani medicine. And although she did have the opportunity to practice conventional medicine, she always chose the herbs first. We grew up with that. We grew up with, you have a tummy ache, well, take this. You have this, take this. So my grandmother was always very, she always told us what to do. And after her passing, my mother said, okay, well, this is what you take. So that as well was in the back of my mind. And living in India, I went to her medical school. I saw where she worked. She worked in a obstetric hospital there, which it was an honor when I was able to work there as well. So I feel like full circle, but there was a lot of that traditional alternative medicine which was practiced. Um, so then I guess fast forward, I was taking all my exams to practice medicine. And in the back of my head, I always wanted to be an integrative practitioner where I could really integrate both worlds together. Um, Fortunately or unfortunately, I had one child after the other, putting my conventional medical education on a halt. So I wasn't able to, I took all the exams for the US and Canada. I wasn't able to get a residency like many foreign medical graduates who do come into the country. It was a roadblock after roadblock. But inside, I knew I still wanted to practice medicine. So again, because it was one of my callings from the beginning, I went into naturopathy. Of course, being one of the eldest members in my class. Going to school with 20-year-olds had its challenges. It was very difficult, and plus, I had a family. I had 5 children. I look after my mother as well, so it was a challenge. But on the back of my head, it was something that I really wanted to do. So I persevered, and I'm here today.
So amazing. What a journey. And I literally got goosebumps and shivers when you talked about practicing where your grandmother had, like having that opportunity. I'm just having this moment of like, wow, like intergenerational, like that way in terms of legacy. And so appreciating that you shared kind of that path. And really, thinking about I'm calling it naturopathy, but naturopathy,
Mhm.
and thinking about my own experience, as because I feel like what you articulated is so different from what we experience here, where even when I go to my own family doctor and for one of the things I do, I have my own naturopath, and I always ask for the blood work to go to my naturopath too. And I'll even get like critical feedback, even though my doctor is from the same community, a South Asian community, but there's such a deference for, the Western medicine versus naturopathy or even homeopathy. Like I've never gotten those referrals,
Mhm.
but I'm like, wow, a doctor like you would be a dream. I wish there were more of you in the world. Um, but like, what opportunities do you see in the field of naturopathy for bridging divides? Because you kind of inferred to, like you had the opportunity to be exposed to, across, classes, and, other likely identity-based. I think about caste. I wonder what that was like. But what
Mhm.
opportunities do you see in this field for bridging those divides, that are racial, class, both among professionals in the space and also their patients? Because I also know a lot of people who it's not even on their radar yet to go to explore this modality. And so I'm curious from your perspective, what are those opportunities?
Yeah. Well, first of all, just to kind of answer one of your initial questions, it's really sad though that my colleagues who I studied with in India, who are practicing doctors in North America, um, they look down upon me now taking this route of a profession. And it's very sad because, firstly, many of those, well, I was the only foreign student in my class in India at the time. So I feel like those students who grew up in India, who were exposed to it for a much longer period than I were, are now looking down on something like that, which it was very apparent around us. So living here right now in Toronto, many practicing physicians and even surgeons do not prefer that their patients go see a naturopath while they're seeing them. Um, if you go back a few years, there were many doctors who actually told their patients that they had to choose between their naturopath or their family doctor, that they could not see both. And it's very unfortunate. It is extremely unfortunate. It is very difficult. Um, and I honestly feel the education aspect may help change their minds. More foreign medical doctors are joining naturopathy, not only because of their interest, but because they are unable to secure a residency in Canada. Um, but it is very, very difficult. And then going to naturopathy in itself, because it's not covered through the government system, then it becomes a medicine of the elite. And that's what I don't like. I feel like it should be accessible to all, that everyone should be able to have that opportunity to see a naturopath and have that. And again, I mean, it's alternative, but it's not always alternative. Usually it's complementary to whatever your family doctor is prescribing. It can complement whatever it is they're doing, just to exemplify that medication so that you can even reduce the dosage of the medication you're taking. Um, but it has so many roadblocks, and I see that regularly, which is one of the reasons why I joined the Ontario Association of Naturopathic Doctors. So I am a board director there, and I did it for the change. Of course, I do know that change happens very slowly, um, but my intentions are good.
Oh my goodness, I appreciate that so much. And really, as I think about, what you've shared even in this kind of conversation around, whose needs are being centered, like, if we were to really think about it from a place of what is best for the person who is seeking the service, who is seeking wellness, really, and healing, how are we losing as a community when that's not respected? Indigenous wisdom isn't respected, indigenous healing practices. And so, who will we be in the future when, I'm going to hopefully manifest that, our OHIP expands to
Yes.
include,
Yeah.
the modalities that truly are life changing for some people. And I think about a book by, I think it's Fariha Royshan, Who is Wellness For? I don't know if you, and really that came to mind as you were talking, and I'll make sure that we share a cover here. So yeah, just really appreciating all that you've shared. So I'm going to think you named the OAND, and I know they're one of maybe a few regulatory bodies. Why do you think it's, from a data perspective, why do you think it's important for bodies, regulatory bodies, and professional organizations to collect demographic and background information? I'm going to say on practitioners and even getting a sense of who's accessing the service, because you did talk about this being like service of the elite, and looking at, where we're going as a society in terms of centering the dignity, belonging, and safety needs of every person. And I think really belonging and dignity can't be accessed if people are unwell and can't be a part of society, can't fully participate. So to me, they're connected. But what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. So, collecting demographic information and background information, I feel on practitioners is quite vital for a few reasons. It can help identify and address gaps in representation and equity within the naturopathic profession. I also feel that better data collection can really highlight the areas where certain groups are underrepresented or face barriers, leading to targeted initiatives that promote diversity and inclusion. So I honestly feel that this approach ensures that the profession really reflects the diverse population that it does serve and fosters a more inclusive environment for both practitioners and patients.
I love that. Again, it's that idea of like if we can name it, right, we can do something about it. And so I mean, I'm a proponent of data and gathering because again, we can't tell that story if, unfortunately, data seems to be the thing that creates change, fortunately or unfortunately. But I appreciate what you're offering with that kind of response. Um, and you talked about in your experience I'm going to say being a student and even I guess as a practitioner in the community now, what you see, because I imagine, people who are on the learning journey still likely cross your path. How can educational institutions do a better job of supporting students from diverse cultural, religious, lived experiences, especially in practical settings like clinical training?
Yeah, it was a tough journey myself as well, and it's a question that I often ponder about. How can we really, better support these students? I feel that one way is definitely providing mentorship programs, um, diversity training for faculty, safe spaces for students to express their unique challenges. I feel these are very crucial. These three aspects, things that may have been touched upon while I was at school, but not really taken a deep dive into it. So it did. I had to struggle. It was a struggle. I really do feel that educational institutions can take some ideas from this because it really will make the students' experience a lot better at school.
Amazing. And I know when we talked earlier, there were some experiences that you shared. Is there anything that you feel called to share as an example? Because again, for viewers who maybe don't have a sense of, maybe the specifics, but is there anything, a story you can share about what that's been like? And maybe even if there was ever a good solution where you're like, that was good, but maybe that's a stretch, but
Yeah, no, I mean, one thing that is standing out specifically now with my naturopathic training was there were a variety of supervisors and some much more culturally competent, I guess, than others. And it was very nice to have someone like that being the supervisor of us while we were doing our internship. Somebody that could really understand where I was coming from, especially, sometimes it may be, for example, a male patient wanting certain examinations done, etc., like that. But them, as a practitioner, there is no real, I guess, barrier to that. But sometimes, things can go the wrong way, and having someone really understand that no, religiously she's unable to do certain things, and that was really important. And if I do go back a little bit, even as a student, we had to practice acupuncture upon ourselves and do certain manipulations and massage to each other as students. And said, well, I'm not going to do it on any of the boys, and I don't have to. We'll do it on, the girls and I will share. But even that, and I said, well, I'm not going to do it in the same room as everybody else. This is not going to happen. So for them to actually have that awareness, they didn't have the awareness, but then there were some of the professors who were open to that and really understood that, okay, religiously, this is what she needs, and we have to abide by it. So it came to the point where they had enclosed a certain area where the girls used to practice there. And before my professor used to come in, he used to actually knock on the outside of the curtain and say, is it okay if I walk in? So, things like that were great. So there was changes, there was openness, but I felt uncomfortable to constantly have to speak up for myself. And not only me, the other girls, because again, there was lots of other foreign girls who were there, but they thought this is cultural norm. We shouldn't open our mouth and just follow blindly. We cannot rock the boat. So I said, well, this is Canada. We can speak up for ourselves. So really advocating for that as well and having that change. I mean, I'm glad that I was able to do it and kind of came out of my own comfort zone to stand up for myself and others.
Amazing. And I appreciate the emotional labor that comes from having to constantly remind the system or remind a structure that, look, this is the way I need to practice. And so I'm hearing the importance of honoring practitioners' boundaries, students' boundaries, and normalizing a diverse way of offering services. That's kind of something that came to mind as I listened to you. And that, again, as someone who has access service, it never occurred to me that those dimensions were there. So I appreciate you giving us an example that folks can kind of wrap their heads around. And then just even animating that there are people who understand this, and it wasn't so hard to come up with a solution. Like, it really, I heard some really, they almost sound like leading practices, like knocking before entering. That's to me quite foundational. If you're a practitioner. So I'm mindful that the time is just whipping by. And you talked about something important, that courage of speaking up. What advice would you have for folks who may be afraid to speak up about issues of equity or inclusion due to fear of repercussions? And so whether that's a practitioner or maybe someone who's access service, that you're like, that treatment didn't feel good. There was something that, do you have any advice for folks?
Yeah, I honestly, I really advise individuals to seek allies, really build a supportive network, both within and outside of their professional environment. So it's really important to document these experiences, and if possible, address the issues collectively rather than alone, because there's usually not just one person involved. So really utilizing the anonymous reporting mechanisms and engaging with these organizations dedicated to equity and inclusion. It can really provide that additional support and mitigate the fear of repercussions, which many of these individuals face and feel.
Yes, and I appreciate that it's not always easy to kind of like speak up. And if we, I think about my children sometimes and put that into context. Like, if I don't address this, my daughters are going to inherit this as an issue. So I try, like you said, like a really powerful, like, sometimes I have to take a friend in with me to go talk to a practitioner, or even just having that conversation of like, who can do this with me? And that we have the right to speak up. I want to normalize that for sure, because maybe for some of our viewers, like the idea is, oh, you don't want to ruffle feathers because you don't want to lose the service, or, but we do have the right to speak up. And when there is I forget what it's called, like the charter or the patient charter of rights. And so that's out there. Appreciating that so much. And I wanted to shift, because I feel like you practice and challenge you challenge oppression, practice, anti-oppression, anti-racism, but what sustained you for the work? What's one practice or maybe source of joy, something that you access to find that joy and to sustain yourself meaningfully for the work?
Yeah, that's I guess it's it's a hard one sometimes, but I feel that my faith is really strong in that sense, and it really drives me to do what I'm passionate about. And also the remembrance of my grandmother. She was extremely strong, extremely driven, and she wanted the well-being of everybody around her, despite race, caste, anything. So that's something that's always in the back of my head, that if not for me, I'm doing it for my children, my mother and my grandmother. So that really kind of pushes me, even when I'm not really looking forward to raising my voice and standing up for what I stand for. That always kind of inkles at the back of my head.
I appreciate that so much, that our family, our lineage, and even, we're working to be good ancestors too, right? So I appreciate that so
Mm-hmm.
much. And I'm gonna share that we did connect around Bollywood when we were
Yeah.
connecting before. So I love that. 'Cause I'm
Yes.
like, listen, as cheesy and problematic as it can be, I appreciate that it's still an
Yeah.
element of joy. So if folks don't know what Bollywood is, Google it. You will find lots of fun stuff. But thank you so much, Ailya, for taking time to be a part of this series that I do. Appreciate you so much. Really, just thanking you for being here today.
Thank you, Leena. It was such a joy to meet you and speak with you as well.
Amazing. And viewers, you can definitely reach out. We'll share her contact information in the closing credits. But really, if you're also someone in community who is building bridges, or if you know somebody that you're like, Leena, you need to talk to this person, by all means, drop me a line at leena@mendingthechasm.ca. I would love to hear from you. But until next time, thank you for watching, and keep building bridges in community.